Hi everybody, it's Sharon. Today's lesson is Jack London. Jack London was born in 1876 in San Francisco. He only lived 40 years, but he packed a lot into that 40 years. From adventure to writing to working to marrying and having a family, and of course celebrity all along. So let's have a look and see some of the places in and around the Bay Area that he lived and worked. For starters, he was born in San Francisco in a place that was then called South of the Slot. It was a working class neighborhood, south of the area where the trolleys ran on Market Street. His mother was a single woman at the time of his birth. She later married his stepfather, John London, so he did grow up with two sisters. But by the time he was 14, he was working. By that time, they had moved to Oakland. They had moved around Oakland to several homes, and he began work at a factory where he made 10 cents an hour. That was not a lot of money even then. And so he took to a life of crime, shall we say. He saved up some money and borrowed some money to buy a small boat. He called it the Razzle Dazzle, and he decided to become an oyster pirate. Oyster beds at the time were privately owned and patrolled, but at night he could potentially go and steal oysters and sell them in the morning to restaurants, no questions asked. And that's exactly what he did. How do we know? Well, he wrote about it. Later on, he became part of the Fish Patrol, so his book, The Tales of the Fish Patrol, tells the story. Later on, he became quite famous for his trip to the Klondike and the Gold Rush, where he wrote about it in The Call of the Wild. The Call of the Wild was a big hit when it came out in 1903, and he became an instant celebrity. It was allowing him to made some money, and he was able to buy some land up in Glen Ellen, which is in Sonoma County, and have a farm. He raised pigs, and he also did experiments with growing crops. And he wrote. He had a cottage there where he wrote his work. He tried to do 1,000 words a day. And eventually he started building a really fine house, which he was going to call Wolf House. And it was almost finished when it burned down unexpectedly one night. The ruins are there today. Now, Jack London was married twice. He was married first to his first wife, Bessie, and had 2 daughters with Bessie. Eventually married Charmian, who became his soulmate. Charmian also loved to do adventures with him. Together they went off on a voyage to Hawaii and the Marquesas on a small sailboat called the Snark. He wrote about that too in The Voyage of the Snark. Together they owned this ranch. They called it Beauty Ranch. And it was Charmian who took care of his effects when he died. He died of perhaps a morphine overdose because he was in ill health and alcoholic at the end of his life. Some people suspected suicide, but most people who knew him well said no, it must have been an overdose. When he died at age 40, he left a legacy of over 50 books that he had written, many short stories and articles as well, and of course his 2 daughters. Charmian built a house called House of Happy Walls next to the cottage, and today that serves as a museum of his life. This is all part of Jack London State Park today in the Glen Ellen Valley of the Moon. Jack London is buried there near the ruins of his Wolf House. Now today, if you go to Oakland, Oakland wants to remember Jack London as their native son. They have Jack London Square right along the water, a place where the marina is, where there's restaurants and shops. It's usually very busy. They brought in a cabin that Jack London lived in Alaska and shipped it in and reassembled it. It's there on Jack London Square. Next to that is Heinhold's Last Chance Saloon. Heinhold was one of the bars that Jack London frequented when he was a young man, probably contributing to his alcoholism. And Heinhold's is also on Jack London Square. And you can see a statue of Jack London. Catch you later. Bye.